A, that music be played in a setting of a fellowship before, and B, have something that comes before me that so poignantly speaks to the work that I am engaged in as part of my life journey. So I want to realize that I forgot the clicker over on the chair by my child. Just a second. So as I was preparing to share my story as one aspect of my narrative, the theme of home seemed incredibly fitting. Specifically, I think now even more fitting after looking out into the audience, as I mentioned earlier, and seeing just many faces of my past and many people who contributed and shaped who I am today, and the inspiration that Fond du Lac has become for me. I will say that I wasn't originally inspired by Fond du Lac, but that'll come out in my story. But I am really honored to be here with you today. And I was looking at the consciousness of what it means for me to be at home in my heart. And so I came up with the title that you see in the program, Being at Home in My Heart, a story of queer, cis woman love and chosen family. And this weaves together both my personal experience as well as my professional expertise. And I will share with you from the professional framework that I operate out of in providing equity and justice for LGBTQ plus communities in higher education at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And also, I will integrate the key pivotal moments that help to shape and honor my journey to being home in my heart, ultimately leading me to find and create family of my heart, affectionately referred to in LGBTQ plus communities as chosen family. Before I launch into storytelling though, I think it's really important to put up this dignity, resiliency, and solidarity piece that comes from Indigenous action. And I share these words because I believe it is important to honor our roots, where we come from, how notions of home, family, and community shift, change, and grow over time and throughout history. I've learned through my racial justice, which I heard echoed in the joys of today, as well as my social justice, health justice, and transformative justice-oriented work, that it is essential to name the fact that we are gathered here today on stolen lands. And so I will share with you some of the words that are used by the Indigenous Action Organization and as an action for accomplices invested in disrupting colonialism and interrupting the ways as a society we operate in this day and time as colonizers. So I share these points of unity to guide the ongoing processes of our allyship, accompliceship, and activism. So these are words from Indigenous Action. All people not indigenous to North America who are living on this continent are settlers on stolen land. We acknowledge that Canada, the United States of America, Mexico, and Central and South America were founded through genocide and colonization of indigenous peoples, which continues today. Think of Standing Rock, and from which settlers directly benefit. All settlers do not benefit equally from the settler colonial state, nor did all settlers immigrate here of their own free will. Specifically, we see slavery, heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, market imperialism, and capitalist class structures as among the primary tools of colonization. These tools divide communities and determine people's relative access to power. Therefore, anti-oppression solidarity between settler communities is necessary for decolonization. We work to build anti-colonial movements that actively combat all forms of oppression. We acknowledge that settlers are not entitled to live on this land. We accept that decolonization means the revitalization of indigenous sovereignty and an end to settler domination of life, lands, and peoples in all territories of the so-called Americas. All decisions regarding human interaction with this land base, including who lives on it, are rightfully those of indigenous nations. We understand that allies cannot be self-defined. They must be claimed by the people they seek to ally with. We organize our solidarity efforts around direct communication, responsiveness, and accountability to indigenous people fighting for decolonization and liberation. We are committed to dismantling all systems of oppression, whether they are found in institutional power structures, interpersonal relationships, or within ourselves. Individually and as a collective, we work compassionately to support each other through these processes. Participation in struggle requires each of us to engage in both solidarity and our own liberation, to be accountable for all privileges carried while also struggling for liberation from internalized and/or experienced oppression. We seek to build a healthy culture of resistance, accountability, and sustenance. And I believe today that I stand before you to share who I am. All of my work is grounded in accountability, honesty, authenticity, trust building, and asking people to be in a place where they can share fully of their self. So for today, I offer to you what I bring into the room. And what I mean by this is how, in this moment in time, I show up in the world. And to that end, I share with you a wonderful word cloud of some of the components of my identity. So I claim that I identify as a white person, a queer-loving mama, a loving partner and parent. I'm married. I had the privilege and access to resources afforded through marital status. I was also able to access domestic partnership when that was the only first legal relationship recognized within our home state of Wisconsin. I also am a queer parent, yet I recognize I'm raising children in a heteropatriarchal society. I'm a cisgender woman, and what that means is I know that a few folks have asked, what is cisgender and why did I have cis in the beginning of my program? For those of you who were not in your, I think it's chemistry, right? Chemistry, same side of a molecule. So this comes from the chemistry language. Yeah, so if you know on the same side of a molecule or similar side of a molecule, what it means is I was assigned female at birth. You'll learn LGBTQ plus communities love acronyms, so that is AFAB, also known as Also Fabulous. I mean, I think it's AFAB. I'm just kidding, but assigned female at birth is the acronym that LGBTQ plus communities use to talk about sex designated at birth. I grew up here in Fond du Lac. I was socialized as a girl, young woman, and I currently identify as woman. Therefore, I am cisgender. And I know that you've had speakers come and speak about being trans-identified, and I don't hold transgender identity, but I do work closely with a lot of transgender-identified people. So I said I'm a cisgender woman, I'm middle class, I'm able-bodied with an attention to aging and navigating healing from being a parent who gave birth to 2 children. I'm a femme without subscription to the gender binary socializations. I'm well-educated. I attended a 2-year women's liberal arts institution, Cottey College, and I graduated with both a bachelor's degree and in anthropology and pre-medicine and completed my master's in public health in 2016. I'm a member of Orange Theory Fitness, and I put this in to keep myself accountable. I'm currently engaged in a transformation challenge to connect to the strength of my own body, my mind, and my spirit. I'm a member of the Philanthropic Educational Organization for Women, PEO. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Niger, West Africa. I'm a sibling. I'm a chosen family member. And I grew up here in Fond du Lac, as I've mentioned. I was born in Milwaukee. I lived in Green Bay. And I landed for the majority of my childhood here in Fond du Lac. And so when I'm asked where home is, I typically answer Wisconsin. However, this is a lesson I learned early on in my life. When I graduated from St. Mary Springs High School in 1995, my family relocated to Green Bay, and I moved away to go to college in Missouri. And what I learned is that home really is where your heart is. So this is the theme for my own journey to knowing myself and being fully who I am. I will say that the college that I attended in the late 90s was not really ready or prepared for lesbian and bisexual women. And as the music that came on before me spoke about androgyny, I believe that the current collegiate environments are not really prepared for trans communities, non-binary communities, gender non-conforming people. And I am a firm believer that we need to be in a resistance. We need to be in solidarity into breaking down these barriers and these unrealistic binaries that we've set up through socialization. So now I'm going to jump briefly between my personal story and setting up who I am and what brought me here today to linking to my professional home and knowing that these are definitely interconnected in my heart, hence the reason I have my rainbow heart up there. But I have been working for the last 13 years at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee as the director of the LGBT Resource Center for, 10 of those years. So I began as the assistant director of the LGBT Resource Center, and we are celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. I mention all of this just to say that I have multiple homes within LGBTQ+ community work. The centerpiece is the logo for the Consortium of Higher Education LGBT Resource Professionals. I know it's a long word, or long title. We just call ourselves the Consortium. But the Consortium is a board that I had the privilege of serving on 2 terms. It's a national organization, and I had the privilege of serving on the executive board for 2 terms. And I learned a lot and gained many community members and family and a sense of home and understanding what it meant for me to be engaged in this work. We also were named as one of the top friendly LGBT+ campuses in the nation. In 2012, we were named in the top 50. In 2017, we were named in the top 25. So we remained on the list when they dwindled the list over the last years. Now what I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to ask help from my tech person, we are going to bring in linking home, but I'm going to talk about a couple of the people that we brought to campus. So first I want to mention, this past week we brought Alicia Crampton. Alicia Crampton, I highly recommend you look into Alicia's work. Alicia has been talking about queer, indigenous people and talking about how they were written out by Spanish colonizers. So looking in Bolivia, which is Alicia's, their home, and Alicia has talked about how they wrote out basically non-binary people in the religious tradition through the colonization. But today I have an incredible video that is just, I'm going to just show a snippet of it because it is, not only because it's a few minutes long, but also because it has some colorful language, and when I previewed it with my mother, she thought that it would be better if I left some of the colorful language out of this setting. So you can see this, it's on YouTube, but I'm just going to have the first 40 seconds be played for all of you today. And it's really, Denise Frohman, it was the World's Poet Slam Champion, the Women's World Poet Slam Champion in 2013. I think you have to switch, Josh, it's looking like it's not coming up on the other screen.
Okay.
Dear straight people,
Maybe shrink my PowerPoint down?
who do you think you are?
Can you shrink the
You have to make it so obvious that I make you uncomfortable. Why do I make you uncomfortable? Do you know that makes me uncomfortable? Now we both uncomfortable. Dear straight people, you're the reason we stay in the closet. You're the reason we even have a closet. I don't like closets, but you made the living room an unshared space, and I'm feeling like a guest in my own house. Dear straight people, sexuality and gender, who do you think you are? Different things. You have to combine in many different ways. Why do I make you uncomfortable? Do you know that makes me uncomfortable? Dear hip hop, why are you fascinated with discovering? Dear straight people, maybe you're the reason we stay in our closet. You're the reason we even have a dear straight people. I don't think God made the living room an unshared space, and I'm feeling like a guest out. Why else would she invent dear straight people? Dear straight women.
Now we've got it, yeah, now we're
Dear
going to
straight
the
people.
English portion, sorry.
Who do you think you are? You have to make it so obvious that I make you uncomfortable. Why do I make you uncomfortable? Do you know that makes me uncomfortable? Now we both uncomfortable. Dear straight people, you're the reason we stay in the closet. You're the reason we even have a closet. I don't like closets, but you made the living room an unshared space and I'm feeling like a guest in my own house. Dear straight people, sexuality and gender, two different things. Come.
Sorry, it won't.
No, that's okay. No worries. Perfect. You just didn't get to see Denise in action, which is pretty awesome. But you'll see the whole piece. What I'll say is that the key part of that for me is talking about the home, the space, talking about living rooms and closets, because that's language that LGBTQ plus communities have used for many decades. Talking about being out of the closet, coming out of the closet, being in the closet, and I also think living rooms not being a shared space is a really key piece that Denise brings forward. Furthermore, what Denise does is Denise links to my professional work, which is also just making sure that we understand that sex does not equal gender, does not equal sexual orientation. And certainly there are many combinations of ways in which people's identities will show up. There is an interrelationship between these identity topics, but they are not necessarily synonymous or one and the same. So what I say about identity is who I say I am is the most important thing to know. If I tell you one day that I identify as a queer person and the next day I tell you I identify as pansexual, those identities are still valid. There's no invalidity to having one identity one day and a different identity another day. Pronouns really do matter, and I say that because they're really critical to be respectful of people and honoring of people, to know what pronouns people use. And all you need to do is simply ask, what pronouns do you use? And then the key piece, and this goes to the handout that I provided to you, that is language is not universal. So the language we have adopted at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee with the LGBT Resource Center is not universally utilized by all LGBTQ plus communities. It's just a foundation, a place to start, and can serve as a reference for you. So why the plus? We oftentimes get asked, why do we have the plus? And I think it's really important to just indicate that the plus is really just to know that we've extended beyond the alphabet, so we're no longer at 26 letters, we're well beyond 26 letters in terms of LGBTQ plus identities. And also that there are, that it's not enough to just have LGBTQ. In particular, I just attended a training this past month, and I was in a room with Collage, which is the children of LGBTQ plus parents. And it was led by children who had LGBTQ plus parents, and they said to me, it's really important to have the plus because we feel like we're being affirmed in that space. As queer spawn, we get seen, and we can feel like we can enter, and we're not having to be LGBT identified to be in the space. So what I just will send with you is just that the idea that everybody has a sex assigned at birth, a gender identity, a gender expression, as well as sexual and romantic orientation or attraction. And in this case, we put those together, but technically they're separate. They're two categories. Thanks to the asexual and aromantic communities, we're able to parse out the distinction between the emotional components of an identity and the sexual components of an identity. And I think I put this up here twice because we only have one equation that we ever use. There's only one mathematical and scientific thing about LGBTQ plus communities, and it's science. Sex does not equal gender, does not equal orientation. So I have a student, Amber Jackson, who designed this phenomenal graphic image that depicts the elements of identity. And it really just helps to break out knowing that in your heart is where your romantic and sexual orientation and attractions occur. Your gender identity is something that is, with knowing who you are, is felt inside of you. So we have this in kind of the mind space of understanding who you are. And then you have your assigned birth sex, which is in more of the biological region, and then we have gender expression, which is how you convey yourself out to the world. And so this is just a little graphic that we did so that we could not have to be looking like unicorns, because the other graphics that we've seen are depicting kind of like mythical creatures, and we're not mythical creatures, we're actually human beings, and so we wanted to have more of a human being piece put to this. So one of the things that I've learned from my work with the Consortium of Higher Education is that there's a big analysis happening around diversity and inclusion versus justice and equity. And I was impressed to see that this is part of your renewal. Paisley mentioned that this has been a journey for you. I was fortunate to be home in the 7 months when you were certainly getting started because of the history in Fond du Lac, where there wasn't a willingness in the UCC church to actually have an open and affirming congregation. The UU Fellowship really stepped up and became what it is today. And so I think that what I like about UU's commitment is that they have the justice and equity piece, and they're really focusing in on what it looks like to do justice and equity. So Dr. D.L. Stewart and also wrote an essay, and it's specifically very focused on higher education, but my friend Dr. Sherry Atkinson adapted it and created it into a large infographic, of which I can get Paisley a copy that you can have here to use for analysis of your own organization. But I think it's really key to look, on the left-hand side, it's talking about diversity and inclusion. These are the terms that we've used to sort of be very, kind of welcoming. But what we're asking is that we use concepts on the right, equity and justice, to really to lift up and center the perspectives of those people who are most impacted and marginalized. So I like to say who's in the room, but who's trying to get in the room but can't even get in the room, or whose presence in the room is under constant threat of erasure. Inclusion asks, has everyone's ideas been heard? Whereas justice responds, whose ideas won't be taken as seriously because they aren't in the majority? And it goes on to continue with more pieces asking about diversity asks, and equity responds, inclusion asks, and justice responds. And I just offer this piece for you because I think it is key as you look to renewal and being a UU that is interested in being invested, that you use that framework of equity and justice. And so I know that I am going to have a few times, and I want to get to my storytelling. This is just my professional heart. So I'm going to give you this thing, but I'm going to start at St. Mary Springs, because this is where I think my story is most poignant, and it probably comes from cleaning my mom's house yesterday. But it's just real. So I think, I'm moving on from my professional home, but I really want to share feelings about being home in the community I grew up in, with the family that I've intentionally created after finding ways to honor, love, and fully embrace being myself. Well, I'm really honored to have been part of this process to highlight the UU's commitment to equity and justice work for LGBTQ+, marginalized and minoritized communities. And I also indicated I'm in awe of the growth of this fellowship because I was here in its beginning. But I will say that my mom mentioned to me yesterday as I was reading some of the pieces that I had found that she was unaware that I had this type of deep reflection while I was in high school. I was in a Catholic high school, and we were asked to write a response to the question of what did Jesus' teachings, what the Catholic doctrine taught, which was homosexuality is a sin, and what we thought about it. And I like to say I got an A+. But upon looking at the essay, I found the essay, I uncovered it, that I had really written what I believe and still stand by today. That I had established roots in being able to, that love is fundamental value, and especially in a Christian-based religion, and loving from the heart was which was most nourishing for any relationship to flourish. And so I know that when I was in high school, I probably had elements of internalized homophobia. I didn't have language for internalized homophobia, and I understand that these aspects of identity are complex, and life complicates them. I've had a home in my family of origin with unconditional love and support, and yet it took me until the end of my years in college to be able to come out to my immediate family. I've worked with many who don't have the same fortune that I did to be able to be open and be honest with who they are. And also, I think that it is key. I went to college, and I had my first year at Cottey College. I was going to a women's liberal arts school. All of my high school friends, which one of them is in the audience, love you. Maybe not Megan, but all of my friends who aren't here had said to me, you're going to become a lesbian, like you're going to a women's college. And I was like, fiercely not going to be identifying as L or B when I went to Cotty. And so I spent my whole first year in the Bible Belt arguing why I believed in Mary, because I was in an environment where my Christianity was under attack, and I didn't have to spend time exploring my sexuality. But by the second year, after I had figured out to defend that I was spiritually eclectic and probably needed to be in a UU from early on in life, I realized that my second year could be more of my focus year on understanding who I was in terms of my sexuality. And in college and in women's college environments, there's a term called LUG, or bug. So they say that you're going to be a lesbian until graduation or bisexual until graduation. So when you graduate, being it was a two-year institution, you're just going to go back and be your straight person. And I actually, knew that in my heart I was bisexual, and I had identified as bisexual, but I don't think that anybody had really seen, or I hadn't been able to speak that. And I think one of the things that what I determined is that when I came out and understood myself more as biromantic and bisexual, now in today's terms I would use queer and pansexual and person-specific, but my relationship status as a woman married to another woman gets read as lesbian. And so I oftentimes send caution to just not ascribe labels to any person until you know how they want to be honored and until you know how they want to be respected. Because there are a myriad number of reasons why one would not share who they are for their own personal safety and well-being. I am at home in my heart, as I have been afforded the opportunity to be me and share fully of myself with others due to my privileged identities. So I put up a piece that I also found, which I was really into collaging before I went off to college, and then it has been part of my life whenever I need to do healing work. And so this is a piece that I did before in 1996 while I was in college, and I think that it really spoke to how I've traveled many roads, and I have come to be comfortable in my skin. And I'm going to share that this collage was one that also helped to reflect the adventurer in me, and the one who is grounded by nature, and values spontaneity, and has a home in the unknowns, and the known to self aspects of a journey, as well as the identity development components that bring me here today. I want to also add that one of my students brought forward for me the other day that it's a note to self, just a reminder that you're so many different identities. That it's really hard though when somebody's focused, especially in a family environment, on one aspect of your identity, to be able to remember that you have so much additional potential. So then I have a piece that I did as an adult version, and this was created prior to us intentionally having a family, but you will see that it captures multiple sentiments of radical honesty that resonate with what I consider my being at home in my heart, also my soul sync. What I mean by that is to say that I ask myself every day to tune into myself, to be present to the life I am living, and check in with my inner being to ask, am I being who I want to be today? The only way for me to feel the spirit of home, family, and community is to live my best life to live my best life by being who I want to be, which is always being me. I really appreciate you affording me the opportunity to be home in the Fond du Lac community I grew up in with the family that I've intentionally created, after finding ways to honor, love, and fully embrace me. Thank you.